roughly 20% of the ETU membership went to war. Australia was saying, your country needs you. If Britain falls, Australia falls, so we need you fellas to go out there and to fight for your country. And they did. And they went out there to face unknown, unimaginable hurdles in this fight. At the start of the war, membership was about 812. It fluctuated between 800 and 1,000 during the war years. As people went off to war, as people came back, as the trade was growing, it was growing so fast, people were joining. And of course, just because you went to war didn't mean that you suspended your membership. You were still a member of the union. The only time you lost your membership was if you died. There were 25 of our ETU members that were soldiers that lost their lives in the war. And they're still lost, and they're still buried half a world away. Finding our ETU members who went to war and telling their stories is one way of honouring their memories, showing them the respect that they truly deserve, and keeping their memory as sacred. We tend to measure our heroes by the medals that have been awarded to them, but when you look through the records of our soldiers, you can see that you can't do that. They were all out there, and they were all heroes in their own way, just trying to do their bit for Australia and for their families back home.
I became aware of the work of Lambis, Englezos and Tim Whitford in finding all of those lost soldiers buried in unmarked pits by the Germans after the Battle of Fromelles in 1916. The work these guys did to give those soldiers, those diggers, back their identity, back their dignity, I think is a compelling story. And it struck me that our union has no record of our servicemen and women who fought for our country. We have nothing to honour them or respect them. You see in old schools and in some workplaces, honour boards recognising their students or their citizens or their employees. We should recognise the ETU boys who fought and died. And these diggers, these ETU men, are a part of our history too. And it's a part of our history that hasn't been told. I think it's critically important that we understand ETU members who went off to war, why they went, their lives, those who died, those who came back, and how their lives were shaped and how their lives then shaped the society we live in.
Lambis and I, we've sort of been campaigners for the missing of the First World War for some time now, and you know, we've been called many things. You know, we've been called historians and crusaders, etc. In actual fact, we're just a couple of schmucks. He's a former teacher and a hippie from the inner suburbs of Melbourne, and I'm a former soldier from Yarram in South Gippsland. Our bag up until recently has been the Battle of Fromelles and finding the missing of the Battle of Fromelles.
Fromelles was the first major battle that the Australians faced on the Western Front. And it was carnage. It was just butchery, brutal butchery.
We'd been at Fromelles for 5 days. The Germans had been there for a year and a half almost. And the idea was to try and hold troops in place there, the German troops, so they couldn't go down to the Somme. And General Haking was in charge of that particular battle.
This is Haking here. He's a British officer who has come in charge of the 5th Australian Division in July 1916. This is the first time the Australians are going to be committed to a major battle on the Western Front in France. They've just arrived. They've been in France for 3 weeks and they fall into the hands of this man.
The Battle of Fromelles was the very first battle for Australians on the Western Front. The men were well trained, well equipped, well motivated and ready for the fight. So on the 19th of July 1916, the Australians go in and they make their very first attack on the Western Front.
In the words of one Australian commander at the battle, it was a tactical abortion. This man didn't put enough planning into it and it was a disaster. And in fact, the Battle of Fromelles remains the single bloodiest day in Australian history. It has never been topped.
This is a remarkable photograph actually taken on the night of the battle, the 19th of July 1916, and it features the German line and the Australian line.
This is a two-division attack. A division's about 12,000 blokes. So we've got the 61st British Division. They attacked with vigour and they took a lot of casualties. However, the lion's share of the casualties at the Battle of Fromelles, this disaster of Fromelles, were taken by the Australian 5th Division. 0 hour for the battle was at 6 o'clock in the evening on the 19th of July, and the soldiers of the 5th Australian Division started across no man's land. The one part of that division was the 15th Brigade, almost entirely from Victoria, and they had 400 metres of bare open ground to cover. They were absolutely slaughtered by machine guns, and unfortunately almost all the bodies of those men were doomed to lie out in no man's land until the end of the war. A few minutes after the 15th Brigade hop off, the 14th Brigade hop off, and it's predictable what's going to happen to them as well. Their no man's land on the right-hand side is about 350 metres wide. On the left-hand side, it's about 120 metres wide. So half that brigade is effectively decimated. Small groups are able to get across, but they're disjointed. They can't form a line. The 8th Brigade, off they go, and they charge across no man's land, and the 8th Brigade gets across pretty well intact. But then they go out of the frying pan and into the fire. They've been told, these Australians, once you get through, don't just take those German trenches. We want you to keep going. This is General Haking. Keep going, men. We want you to find and hold the second line of German trenches. Now, I've looked at this photo 500 million times in the last few years, and I can't see a second line of German trenches in this photo. And the reason I couldn't find that second line of German trenches is because there isn't bloody one there. So, some of these men in these little scattered groups go forward looking for this second line of German trenches. And then the Germans really kick in their counter-attack plan. The Germans have been here for 18 months. Our guys had been there for 3 days, and in that 18 months the Germans had rehearsed for this moment. This was going to be their finest hour. And so when the sun comes down in the dark, down they come off the ridge. How could the Germans tell each other apart? Well, the Germans were all singing their national anthem. Anyone not singing the German national anthem that night was killed. And so by about 4 in the morning on the 20th of July, there are no Australians left fighting in the German line at Fromelles. It's found that during that battle we have lost 5,533 men killed, wounded, taken prisoner, or simply missing, disappeared from the face of the earth. The single bloodiest day in Australian history is recorded in the newspaper in London as some significant raids took place near Armentières where significant numbers of German prisoners were taken. That's it. That's how the Times reports it. The single bloodiest day in Australian history.
Our own General, General Mackay, in the days after the battle, he says they'll get used to it. And Sir Richard Haking says it's probably done the Australians a great deal of good.
No man's land was full of our dead and wounded, and the compounding tragedy of the Battle of Fromelles was the fact that the Germans offered us a truce so the dead and wounded could be gathered after the battle, but we knocked it back. Our own General, General Mackay, could have shown some compassion for his men and allowed that truce, but what that meant was that the majority of the wounded were left out there for more, and the dead were left out there for more than 2.5 years before their bodies could be recovered. There were many selfless acts of courage in the days after the battle. As many as 30 Australians are killed going out to bring in their wounded mates because they can't stand down. They can hear them and they can see them, so they go out there to try and bring them back.
And this is what meets the Germans the next morning. There are now significant numbers of Australian dead in and around their trenches, as well as their own dead from that night. Because it's high summer in northern France, there is a problem on their hands. They need to get these men gathered and processed for intelligence purposes and put underground very quickly before the spread of disease takes over.
And the Germans, they took many, many photographs, and it's the interpretation of photographs that led us on this process of research and advocacy, because we have many photographs showing Australian and British soldiers being taken back somewhere for burial.
This one shows the main street of Fromelles, a bit blown up at about the time of the battle. But what's significant about this photo, it shows this railway running down the left-hand side of the street. And what we've found out is that the Germans had this network of light railway running behind the German front line. And they can, using these little push trolleys on railway tracks, get men and equipment anywhere in their front line very quickly.
Again, here we have that light rail, and on that light rail we have the carts stacked high with the bodies of Australian and British soldiers being taken somewhere behind the ground, the German lines, for burial somewhere.
We looked at aerial photographs and looking for anomalies in the ground.
The 17th of June 1916, there's that light rail cutting through the corner of a wood, and before the wood, no digging at all. Then,
10 days after the battle, and you can see that 8 big pits have magically appeared, and there's lots of foot traffic and earth being moved around those pits. If you go to Christmas time of the same year, you can see that 5 of those 8 pits are now backfilled and mounded up. And then by the end of the war, 3 of those 8 pits have been left open. The 5 that had been backfilled and mounded up have now, because of the fertile soil of France, the grass has grown and these things have just disappeared into the background of France. You know, we thought we had it. So a case was made to the Australian Army at this time. Our crew went to Canberra, presented our case, and they said, not enough evidence. Come back and get some more evidence.
which is what we did.
Which is what we did.
Eventually a German document was found in Munich, dated 2 days after the battle, in which it said, "You will prepare ground before Pheasant Wood for 400.
That was a very important document because it mentioned these 5 collective graves, and it solved the first piece of that puzzle, that there was once a mass grave. Whether it was still there was yet to be proven.
Here we have a modern day photograph. Even here I believe you can detect some undulation in the ground. The landowner told us that they tried to plough that land, but it was too lumpy to plough. They tried to plant vegetables, but the vegetables never ever grew there. All that ever grew there were these strange little blue flowers.
We always had this Plan 27B, which was go there in the dark with a shovel, a torch, and a good French lawyer. But we didn't need it in the end because this guy, Tony Pollard, and his team from Glasgow University came up trumps. What they did was they brought this clever technology, as he talks about. They had a ground-penetrating radar, which looks through the ground, and what that proved was there'd once been some holes there. Then they went over it, and this is where it got good. They went over it with some of the best metal detectors in the world. And what they came up with was 772 metallic artefacts. On the second last day of the dig, they found this thing. And this was the key to the puzzle which led us to finding 250 lost men. So this artefact, this one thing, about the size of a 10-cent piece, proved that Australian soldiers had been there. Now we knew from the historical record that they'd never been there alive. How did this thing get here? It came there on a dead man. And to make matters even more exciting for us, we were able to track this one particular artefact down to one individual, one man, and it was this fella. His name's Private Harry Willis. He's a 19-year-old kid when he joins the army. He's from Alberton in South Gippsland, and he's given that medallion from his shire, the Shire of Alberton, as a good luck charm before he leaves. Harry Willis is my great uncle, and I had been searching for him almost my entire life. And then out of the ground pops up his good luck medallion. Now, I was a soldier for a long time, and the last thing I ever want to experience is to be left in someone's paddock for eternity with nothing marking me and never get my name. This is what we are so passionate about. We had seen them, and we think it is not good enough to leave good Australian boys lying in paddocks. These men did not want to die. They wanted to go home to their families, get the job done, go home, raise kids, and live their lives. These men did not want to die. Anyone who tells you that soldiers lay down their life for your country, I'll call them a liar. None of my mates ever signed up for that. They have their lives ripped from them violently in the night. And this was the same with these poor men.
Through the process, we were told that this is ancient history, let it go. You know, people really don't care about what way back then.
A lot of people are saying, why don't you leave them there in peace with their mates? You know, they're buried with their mates, they fought together, they're buried together, leave them alone. And that's wonderful sentiment. But you know what? We'd seen them. And I saw a boy in there with telephone wire still wrapped around his ankle, where they dragged him across a paddock and just dragged him into a pit. I had seen one boy there lying on his back with his arms outstretched, looking like Jesus on the cross, and his mouth wide open like he was screaming. There was another boy there lying in the fetal position. And yet 2 more boys there, 15 years of age, but we don't know who they are. So if you just put a memorial on top of these holes, you remove any chance of these guys getting, 1, their dignity back, and 2, their identity back.
People need to know what happened. They take ownership of their own family history and their country's history. And what they seek to do through acts of remembrance is to find their missing soldiers, and it is not blood specific. I believe there's a collective ownership of the process and the ground at Pheasant Wood and the ongoing research. If you can find them, got to do it.
Thousands of Australians had come forward offering their DNA. You know, did you have a soldier, they asked. Did you have a soldier in your family that was killed at the Battle of Fromelles? Thousands of people came forward, and it was a wonderful thing. 16th of March at 10 to 9 in the morning, I got a phone call, and it was the Army, and they said, it's my honour and my duty to inform you that among the remains at Pheasant Wood, positively identified the remains of your great uncle Harry Willis, and he will now have a grave of his own with his name on it. So, name returned, dignity returned. First thing I had to do was jump in the car, and I broke 27 land speed records, getting to South Gippsland because I wanted to be the one that told my nan. My beautiful nana that started all this with me. See, she'd grown up in a house of broken men and broken women. She could never speak Harry's name. His photo was on the mantelpiece. They had to whisper his name for fear of upsetting his mum. You know, and this happened in families all over the world. No more of that. Have a look at the look on her face. No teeth, of course. She'd offered to give DNA, and I said, look, Nan, you know, yep, she said, I'll do it, no drama. I said, Nan, they might have to chop off your finger to do it. And she said, oh, well, if I have to. Grief is contagious. It is passed down through the generations. And there's something about closing that loop for them, giving them the ability to say goodbye, whether it's that generation or the ones that follow. It's a place, you then give that person the place of pilgrimage, a place to go and weep for their forebears, and I think that is really important. The simple fact that thousands upon thousands of Australians travelled to Fromelles for the final burial at Fromelles illustrates just how connected Australian people are to the dead of the past. And there was a collective sigh of relief, I think, that those men at Fromelles had been found by people that were not necessarily related to them, but just felt a connection because of the bonds of nationhood.
So over 3 weeks, 249 are buried. Each of them has a full military burial with a priest reading over them.
You know, the bonds of nationhood are one strand that draw us to these men. There are many others. It's not just about honouring the missing and the dead. We want to honour all ETU soldiers that served in that war and remember their lives and their contributions. We had ETU members in all the major battles throughout the First World War. Alf Galbraith, he was a signaller. He was a 20-year-old signaller, electrician, and he was out there on the battlefield on the 15th of July. This is before the major battle started, so I'm only presuming that he was laying the telephones in preparation for the battle. And while he was doing that, he was shot and wounded, and he died before the major battle on the 19th of July, 1916, and that was his war over. Then we had another young bloke called Cliffy Angus, a 19-year-old soldier who had had to have a letter from his mum to say, yeah, I let my son join the army. So Clifford had this letter from his mum giving him permission to join the army, and he'd gone off to fight for his country, and his first battle was in Fromelles. And he marched into battle on the 19th with all the other soldiers, and he was wounded, shot and wounded. Now Cliff was typical of all of the soldiers that went to war, determined to see it through to the end. He was wounded at Fromelles, But he was subsequently wounded twice more before the war ended. Each time he would come back and get fixed up, rehabilitated, and go back out there, back onto the front, back into the hell that he'd experienced before, to see it through to the end. And that takes a lot of courage.
So, after Fromelles was over, you know, everyone was slapping each other on the back. We had decided that our work is far from finished. So we looked at the next battle that was logical, this Battle of Bullecourt. This battlefield at Bullecourt, you know, it's beautiful rolling farmland now, but in 1917, April and May 1917, it was a place of abject horror.
Well, Bullecourt was another one of those inexplicable diversionary battles that in the end turned out to be an enormous cost in life for absolutely no military gain whatsoever. The first Battle of Bullecourt took place on the 10th and the 11th of April 1917. General Haig decided he would send his troops into the Bullecourt area, which was like a little amphitheatre, and the Germans, they were a professional outfit, and they had their machine gun nests situated absolutely perfectly around the perimeter of this amphitheatre. Even so, Haig and his generals decided they would send in the soldiers. And they didn't have any artillery, it was off elsewhere, and one of the other battles that the French were doing, so they decided to give them 12 training tanks. These are fancy brand new state-of-the-art warfare machines. And so they sent them these tanks, but these tanks couldn't even go as fast as the soldiers could walk. So the soldiers got fed up with them, and they didn't, and they marched ahead of them. They made so much noise that these tanks alerted the Germans to the actual Allies going forward. And so when they saw these tanks, they sprayed them with their machine gun fire and thought, oh, the bullets go straight through, this is easy. They were no better than cardboard cutouts, these tanks. There's 12 of them, they didn't even get to the front line. They didn't even get to the trenches. The Germans just sprayed them with with machine gun fire and stopped them in their tracks. And so the Aussies went without them.
Australians smashed into this line and through sheer guts and bravery held this line for a short time. And we're talking about belts of barbed wire, 50 metres thick, with machine guns and artillery covering it. This battle is horror. And there are so many fine young Australian men lying under this soil, being ploughed year after year after year.
We had one of our members who was part of that, and his name was Eddie Busbridge. Eddie Busbridge was an Essendon boy who enlisted in July 1915, aged 23. He landed in Marseille in France in June 1916, and his first taste of war was at Pozières on the Somme, where he was wounded. When he recovered, he was sent into battle at Bullecourt on the 11th of April, and when the battle was over on the 12th, it only took just over 24 hours, and the smoke had dissipated. Eddie was listed as missing in action. He'd been wounded and captured by the Germans. Eddie spent the rest of the war in a German POW camp and was repatriated to Britain on December 1918. Because that was such a major failure, they pulled the troops out, and the general said, oh well, we'll just have another go. And so they grabbed as many troops as they could. They got another division of troops and said, we're going to go again. And they sent them in a second time, and a second time it was just as brutal. There was just as much carnage.
The locals, they built this monument. It's called the Cross in the Field between Bullecourt and Riancourt, where many Australian soldiers assaulted over a 2-month period. There are 2,243 missing from both battles of Bullecourt.
Last year it was kind of by accident, kind of a privilege, that we ran into a crew from the Electrical Trades Union who just happened to be loitering with intent in that area, and we were able to walk that ground, and we were able to find some amazing things at this battlefield. We went to a belt of barbed wire where the Australians, or the place where Australians had pierced a belt of barbed wire, and looking down on the ground, things are always as they should be on a battlefield. We looked down and walking through this cornfield, we were able to find pieces of Australian equipment and bits and pieces of personal items left there by Australians who died there in 1917. Bullecourt was, you know, it was a great victory for the German division that fought there. There is nothing good about the Battle of Bullecourt for Australia. What we're doing now is we've sent a researcher with the help of the Electrical Trades Union, one of the best researchers in the world, a man called Peter Barton. He was instrumental in our Fromelles work. He's gone to archives in Germany because we just can't find the evidence that we need to locate these men. Peter Barton's in Germany looking for any evidence of these burials, and we will now just wait and see.
There were 25 of our ETU members that were soldiers that lost their lives. James Daniels is one of the first of the ETU members that I found. He is a 27-year-old electrician, and he joined up in August at the same time the war was declared, and he went off to Gallipoli, and he was killed on the 25th of April 1915. We had a member called Frank McCoubrey. Now he was a 19-year-old apprentice when he joined up. Came from Footscray, a Footscray boy, and he was a signaller. On the 12th of May, he was in one of the dugouts installing a company telephone, and when a shell hit it, and one of his soldier mates said he was just buried alive, and he's still wherever he is. He's never been found. The ETU was privileged to connect with Frank McCoubrey's family and to go at least somewhere to understanding just how a loss of a loved one affects a family for many years to come. And that was an experience that really brings it home to you as to why what we're doing is important. And they showed us a lot of his memorabilia, and it was quite moving to look at this little notebook that he'd written in during his training before he went there. Written in pencil, he's talking about what he should remember, and you can read the excitement between the lines. But the poignancy of that was that you knew that in less than a year, he was going to be lost.
These things, lots of families didn't talk about much about the war and what had happened. And of course, with no body found, that made it difficult. But the thing that we've got at home that Peter's mum had was a pocketbook, which as a kid, I can remember my grandmother, who was Frank's mother, of course, saying to me, this was the pocketbook that Uncle Frank had, and it's got holes through the pocketbook where shrapnel evidently had gone. And we still don't know whether he had it on him or whether it was elsewhere, but as far as the family were concerned, that was how he was killed. And Peter and his mum's got that pocketbook at home, and it's got papers in it which the holes go right through, so the pocketbook didn't stop anything, it just went straight through.
Frank was one of those that was lost in unknown graves, never to be found, never to be known. But there were 6 altogether. There was Reggie Bryant and Henry Parker were lost in Gallipoli very early. And then on the Western Front, we lost Cliff Drummond, Frank McCoubrey, Tanya Falloon, and Henry March. They're all still somewhere beneath the soil in the fields of France. Tanya Falloon was a 6'2" electrician from Richmond who was one of our most decorated members. He served in Gallipoli. Then he went over to France where he won the military medal and bar. And then on the evening of the 10th of April, outside of Ploegsteert Wood in Belgium, put his head up over the parapet and was shot through the mouth by a machine gun, died instantly.
We didn't really hear that he was a hero. We just heard what a wonderful person he was, what a wonderful brother he was, but it was not till much later. My son went to the shrine one day and asked to see Uncle Ned's records at the shrine. And he came back and he said, Mum, Uncle Ned was a hero. He's got a military medal and bar. Well, you see, there was not much. Everyone said he was a wonderful soldier, the family, but nobody. I think after the First World War, they wanted to forget the war. We didn't know he was a hero.
I really think for soldiers in any war who go through combat and are really exposed to combat, if you read their war diaries, if you listen to what they say when they've been through so much hell, is they ask, how would anyone at home ever understand what we've done? And I think that led to a lot of the silence of the diggers. They couldn't explain to us what they'd been through, or even hope we could really grasp it. But perhaps now, with better history and a more honest telling of the tale, we could relate to it better than the general public could back in 1917.
We had no understanding of it, but I'm sure that my mother and Leon's dad and the other sister who was left at home at that time were deeply worried about what was going on in France, and certainly had their worries about Frank and his safety. But of course, when you receive a little canvas bag with these artefacts in it that are the only things that are left of a son that's gone overseas, we have no appreciation truly of just how deeply they felt to have lost him.
It's a really interesting point to ponder why so many thousands of young Australian men back in 1915, 16, 17, 18 left their world as they knew it, joined the army and fought in a bloody, horrible war, not of their making, halfway around the world in Europe. You know, it's interesting, I think for some, undoubtedly a spirit of adventure, a bit of a fascination with Mother England as it was known in those days. You know, there was a lot of hype about for king and country, and I think there's lots of reasons why those young men went to war. But I think then when you shift to those men when they were fighting together, when they're in the absolute hell of war, of trench warfare, and how horrible it was, they may have gone to war for different reasons, but they died for their mates, and they died with their mates, and it was the sense of mateship. I think king and country meant nothing in the hailstorm of Pozieres or Bullecourt or Mont St Quentin where those men fought.
Somebody who's buried in a cemetery, they've got their own place. It's somewhere, it's a focal point for their families to say, well, that's where our George is, or that's where our Alf is. Whereas in the unmarked graves, people just don't know where they are. They're just lost.
You know, as unionists, we fight for the dignity of the living. Their hours of work, putting food on the table, being able to get by in the best way they possibly can. So we remember our living members and we fight for them every day, but let's not forget those who gave their lives for us too.